started. Thank you everybody for being on this panel. Thank you, Bryan, for moderating and helping organize it. And thank you to everyone who's here. And I'll keep letting people in. I'm just going to pass the reins over to Bryan Korn. He's one of our board members, and we're thrilled to have him. He's also the VP of content at SONY TV Pictures Kids, and has so many accolades. I would take up the whole hour to name them all. But Emmy, BAFTA, Annie Award-winning children's television creator. So thank you, Bryan. I'll be your tech support, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Nina. Good evening. Good spooky evening, everybody. Welcome to the Astoria Horrorfest panel. I try to get my lighting in here, but I think all it's done is make my eyes just look like they're a little glowy. But hey, welcome everybody. I see we're just joined by David. Hi, David.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, I'll do just a quick round of introductions as a kickoff to what I would love to be a relatively free-flowing conversational hangout among these extraordinarily talented like horror hounds, fright nighters. Well, I mean, what's a good turn of phrase for people who make spooky movies?
Freaks.
Freaks and geeks.
I'll go with that.
Well, I'll start, David, with you. David M. Nightmare is a creative independent filmmaker. He's a writer, director, producer. His gritty, character-driven films have received endorsements, worldwide acclaim. He co-founded and helmed Airbed, a production company banner under which he garnered hundreds of laurels and awards for his various short films, premiered music videos on MTV and Glamour, and produced content for the likes of Louis Vuitton, Red Bull, the Leslie Loeb Museum, amongst others. Welcome, David.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you for the kind words.
Of course. I'll say hi to Robin. Hi, Robin. Robin is an award-winning actor and choreographer, making her directorial debut with Beach Day, which I hope everybody's seen. It's on the Astoria Horrorfest webpage, as are a bunch of the shorts. If you haven't seen it, watch it immediately after this panel. It's amazing. Robin is interested in film as a healing modality for individuals and communities alike. I love that. And in exploring the space where art, social justice, and magic converge. Welcome, Robin.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Mike is an award-winning director and producer for film and theater, born and raised in the UK. He founded Evening Squire Productions in 2016 and has created multiple award-winning short films. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, nice to meet everyone. And yeah, thanks for having me along.
Thanks for coming. Andy up in Ottawa, Canada. Thank you for joining us from the frozen north. Andy is a director, art director, and writer. Andy's independent animated horror anthology series, Don't Walk Home After Dark, just premiered its second episode, The Worm, on YouTube. And it's accumulated over 500,000 views in less than 2 weeks. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And last but certainly not least, John Robertson, award-winning screenwriter from a tiny suburb north of New York City. All of Jonathan's feature screenplays have placed in the Academy's Nickel Fellowship and Austin Film Festival Screenplay Competition, and he has won the Roxy Underground Film Festival, the Robin Pell Award, and the Lake Placid Film Forum, which I can only assume is a film forum dedicated to the movie Lake Placid. Is that correct, John?
Yeah, we all got giant, his size golden alligators. That was the award for that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Welcome. And then we might be joined by a special guest. I'm like on pins and needles. I have no idea. But if somebody named Lloyd joins, then he is also part of the panel. I will say no more.
I'm keeping an eye out.
Okay, perfect. I'll say no more than that. So I'm going to open it wide to all the panelists for this first question, which is like maybe as broad as it possibly gets. And I would love to hear really from everybody on this. As a storyteller, what brought you to the genre? What brought you to horror?
I'll jump in. Gladly. For me, I think that horror, it was always around when I was younger. I watched incredibly inappropriate films for my age. So in second grade, I was watching Terminator 2, and I remember that the T-1000 villain in that film gave me nightmares and nightmares for weeks. And the only way that I could really kind of get over my fear was watching the behind the scenes and how it was done. And I absolutely fell in love with it. And I think Terminator 2 is a fantastic movie to see the behind the scenes for as well. And I think that's where my love for the genre kind of came about. And just from being really young and freaking myself out and just watching how it's made and getting really into it, there was the first blood drop. Yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
Well, I can go next if you guys don't have your answers figured out yet. That's a tough question. I think I've always kind of been drawn to horror. I think I've always liked stuff that gave me like a really strong emotional reaction, like a lot of stories that give you something intense, that you feel while you're experiencing them. And I like all kinds of stuff, not just horror, but I found like over the years as I've gotten older, you see so many movies and you read so many books and you hear so many stories, and then like what Dave was just saying about Terminator 2 was something I remember vividly, watching that movie and being like tingly, like in my stomach. I remember feeling like, oh, this is like thrilling, this is like really interesting. And that's such like a basic like emotional response to such an intense story. And then I found as I got older, it just kind of turned into like, certain things maybe became kind of old hat for me, but horror always kind of still felt like I still got like a little tingly in my stomach whenever I was really watching something that was really effective. And I also think that that's kind of like a really interesting thing in that it's sort of universal. It's very like human and accessible to all different kinds of people. So that's what I like about also telling horror stories, is that it can kind of, as long as you can bring something real to it and something like genuine, it can create like a really interesting, genuine connection with other people that may be, completely different from you, in a sincere way.
Thanks, Andy.
I can hop in next. I'm not sure that I'm a first-time filmmaker, and it happened to be a horror film. But it honestly doesn't really fit nicely or easily into the horror genre, in my opinion. Beach Day kind of exists in a space that is a thriller, a horror, a drama, an experimental film, a dance film, all at once. And I think horror just kind of accidentally became a genre that it fits within. So I wouldn't say that I, as an artist, am necessarily particularly drawn to horror. However, I have always really been drawn to media about witches and the figure of the witch. And our lead character is a witch. I think starting as far back as being a little kid, being a little girl, I was presented with limited characters who were also women in media, right? And it tended to be the ingenue, the Disney princess, or the villainous witch. And the villainous witch was empowered. She had control over her narrative, and she was given permission to experience a full range of emotion and not just sweetness, not just niceness. And I think that's true, even if we move beyond media for children. I think, there's a reason there are so many films and TV shows about teen witches, teen girl witches. And I think that's because when you're going through puberty, your emotions go bananas and it feels almost supernatural. And so I love the idea of using the figure of the witch as a stand-in for a woman whose emotions might be suppressed, and finally being able to unleash and experience that full range.
That's amazing. Not the least of which of those Teen Witch movies is Teen Witch, which is is a great watch this time of year.
Absolutely.
We're joined by Lloyd Kaufman. Hey, good evening, Lloyd. Thanks for joining. Lloyd is here from Trauma Pictures, which is Astoria local, right, Lloyd?
Yes, we are in Trauma Building is in Astoria on 11th Street near 36th Avenue. And we welcome if any of you want to come and see some very nice young people who love cinema, drop by, give me a call.
Yeah, I don't know, for me, I think, I echo what some of the folks, before me said, that I was definitely introduced to horror at a very young age. My grandfather was a live-in super at a building that just gave him the full cable package. So all of a sudden, like HBO and Stars and Showtime and all of these uncut movies were playing, well into the night. So I'd be up, because I'd be too afraid to go to sleep. And then I think, as I got older and got interested in into filmmaking and interested in making films, I kind of enjoyed horror as a confrontational genre. And I think that's one of the coolest things about it. It's, there are adventure films or, romance films that tell a great story and that hit on emotional beats, but none of them can quite confront social change or social issues the way that I think horror has in the past. So I think that's one of the most exciting things about it, and that's kind of one of the things that made me stick, I think, with horror. From the films I made in college to the films that I'm writing now.
Yeah, I feel like
have you got a favorite horror film? I'm 77 years old. I'd be curious to hear what. I'm sure you know more than I do. What's your, if you have a favorite or favorites?
Like picking my favorite child, I think, but the ones that made an impression on me as a little kid were American Werewolf in London, and then as I got older, I read this book called Make Your Own Damn Movie, that this older guy wrote, Lloyd, and between the Toxic Avenger and the Evil Dead movies, and Sergeant Kabuki Man, movies like that made you want to drop what you were doing and go make movies. So I think those will always have a very, very special place in my heart.
Oh, thank you. It's made a sad old man feel good. Thanks, Jonathan.
Mike?
Yeah, I think I came to the genre kind of late in a lot of ways. I mean, I've always watched films, horror films, kind of thrillers, the creepy stuff, all that kind of thing. But my early career was very much theater focused. So when I started transitioning into film, I would just try different genres just to kind of teach myself. I've made some dramas, some coming of age stories, a musical, some puppet short films, kind of a whole variety of things. And so with this film, with Cook with the Heart, it started off as a dark comedy. That was the intention, that was the plan. And then as we started adding kind of more and more of those, I guess, horror elements to it, people started responding, audiences started responding, and they kind of guided it into this kind of horror festival world and things like that. So it was always an intention of mine to make a horror film. I didn't expect it necessarily to be this one, but I've really kind of dipped my toe in the genre, so to speak. And yeah, looking forward to some more.
Amazing. Thank you, Mike. We're joined by our last panelist. Marta, are you there?
Hello.
Hi, Marta. Welcome.
Hello. Bryan, right?
Yes, yes.
Hello, Bryan. I have to say I'm sorry that I am late, but I just arrived to Lima and I thought we were in the same time zone, but I'm 1 hour before.
Oh my
So
goodness.
I'm on my way, so I'm taking you on a walk around Lima.
Amazing. What a treat to have an evening walk around Lima. Well, Marta,
Yes.
I'll introduce you and then I'll kind of paraphrase the question that everybody answered in case you
Okay.
want to. And if not, I want to make sure you're walking safely with full
Yes,
attention on
yes,
all
yes. I have
crosswalks.
my brother by my side, so it's not a
Okay.
problem.
Just watch traffic. But I will say Marta began her career as a journalist and also studied filmmaking at NIFA in Manhattan and screenwriting at EIC TV in Cuba. She developed her career as a freelance producer in New York, Mexico, Spain, working on commercials, TV shows, music videos, and independent films. And the film that is featured at the Astoria Film Festival is called Welcome to New York, beautifully shot in the city on 16 millimeter. So
Yes,
welcome, Marta.
thank you very much. Very
And
happy to be here.
thank you. And thank you for joining us from Lima. The question was, what brought you to horror?
Oh, I think it grows in your childhood, basically. I've been lucky enough to be the little sister among many of my brother's friends, so terrorizing a child was always something, no? Just to watch movies. And I also, it was the 80s, so we have tons of movies there to admire and to develop a love for horror, no?
Awesome. Thank you, Marta. Lloyd, are you up for answering the same question? What brought you to horror?
Well, Michael Hurst, my partner, and I for 50 years, we like comedy. And when we started off, we got into raunchy comedies before Porky's. So we had we did okay for a while. All of our comedies have a lot of social subtext. They're satires, but those were raunchy and there was something new. But then the studios started being very unfair, and they started making the stuff we were making, except they were using good actors and good scripts. So we had to go in a different direction. And one day, Michael Hurst saw something in the one of the house rags, like a Variety or a Hollywood Reporter. Horror films are no longer commercial. So Troma's been somewhat successful by going against whatever Variety or Hollywood Reporter or the experts say. Frankenstein, I guess, is my favorite horror film. The most frightening movie I've ever seen was, probably still is, Bambi. I saw that my mother, who was the subject of my brother's movie Mother's Day, which is a Troma movie and possibly our best. Eli Roth's favorite horror film, but just doing anything with my mother was like a horror film. But anyway, she took me to see Bambi, and I was in the fetal position for months. So that was a very scary movie. A lot of those Disney movies were dark and scary, and The Witch was not very nice in those movies. But let me say something else. Anna Biller, do you guys know Anna Biller? Made a movie called The Witch. It's terrific. And her first movie, Viva, was selected for the first Troma Dance Film Festival, which is a movie that, a festival that's been going on for 20 some odd years. Started in Park City by Trey Parker and Matt Stone when we were trying to get people interested in their first movie, Cannibal the Musical, which combines this Cuisinart of it's Oklahoma meets the Toxic Avenger, basically. Trey hired a room and had a one-movie film festival, and then the next year we set up Troma Dance, where you could see the movies for free. You could submit your movies for free, and no VIP policies or any of that stuff. And now, after 23 years, we got policed out of Park City, Utah, because of Sundance being a bit difficult. And now we run it in New York. We just had the 23rd one. But Anna's first movie was Viva, and the latest one I've seen of hers is The Witch. Is terrific. Robin, have you seen it? It's very good. Oh, you should see anything Anna Biller makes. And she loves movies. She's quite a scholar of movies. It's at Miss Anna Biller on Twitter, if you're interested. I made the mistake of going to Yale. I happened to get a roommate freshman year who was a movie nut. Started watching all these movies, kind of auteur type movies by John Ford, Howard Hawks, Roger Corman, Sam Fuller, Jean Renoir, Lenny Riefenstahl, speaking of witches. And I just decided during one of the Ernst Lubitsch movies, To Be or Not to Be, later remade by Jack Benny and whomever. So if somebody wants, it was during that Ernst Lubitsch movie, which was definitely not a horror film, although it dealt with Nazi Germany, which is pretty horrible, but it was very, very funny and biting satire and just a masterpiece. Crazy, but also a very controlled masterpiece. And I've been watching a lot of Todd Browning recently. His silent movies, they're terrific. One called The Unknown, another one called The Three, damn it, Lon Chaney's in it, The Three Somethings, also silent, terrific. And he puts in elements of humor the way John Whale does with his horror movies. At any rate, I'll shut up, sorry.
We need a syllabus after this. I mean, I feel like at the end, all of the things that have been recommended, I don't know, we are recording. It'd be great to put them into like a watch list or like an IMDb list for everybody to watch, just because I feel like there's
Certainly
a week's worth
Eli
of movies.
Roth, his Cabin Fever is Cabin Fever is great, and he's great, and My Brother's Mother's Day is probably our best movie. It's really a masterpiece. We have a streaming service called Troma Now. It's free the first month. You can see it if during the first month, which is free. I would check out Mother's Day, and it's both. It combines satire, horror, comedy, but it is really scary as opposed to Toxic Avenger or Class of Nukem High or Sergeant Kabuki Man NYPD, which are not really. They're disturbing and they're satirical, but I wouldn't say they were scary. They're not really horror films.
Thanks, Lloyd.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me spout.
Well, the first question was about beginnings, where you got to everybody the genre of horror. I'd love to kind of dig into some of the specific films and some of the choices that you all have, as writers and directors, have made. Robin, I'd love to start with you just on the theme of beginnings. Your film begins with an epigraph, a quote from the ancient Greek tragedy Medea by Euripides. Hate is a bottomless cup. I will pour and pour. I mean, those Greeks had something going on. Can you talk about the choice of putting that quote from Medea in front of your film and how that might connect back to the origins of that project?
Absolutely. So this film is not a reinterpretation of Medea. It's not, I wasn't even thinking of Medea when I wrote the screenplay, to be honest with you. But the tragedy of Medea kept coming up during the shooting process. If you've seen the film or if you watch it after this, I don't want to spoil anything for those who haven't seen it, but the final shot is a moment of catharsis. And when I was directing that shot to our lead actor, I kept saying, this needs to feel like Greek tragedy. It cannot feel like contemporary film. It cannot feel naturalistic. She drops to her knees in the ocean and releases, and it is guttural. It is raw. I wanted it to feel ancient, something so human it predates written word is what I wanted it to feel like, so that we could all connect to it. And so we kept referring to it as the Medea shot when we were in pre-production and when we were on set. And we kind of wanted to honor her in that way. Medea is obviously a famous witch, one of the first famous witches in literature, up there with Circe. And it is a film about a witch. It's also a film about someone who is hurt by a partner, and then in order to enact revenge, ends up hurting themselves as well. And that is what this story is about. And, in Greek tragedies, they're typically about the fall of a very powerful man. I like to think that this film is also about the fall of a very powerful woman, because she does hurt herself at the end. And then the final Medea, thread is Hecate, the Greek goddess, thought to be the goddess of witchcraft, the first goddess of witchcraft, of liminal spaces, of the in-between. We used her as an inspiration for the ritual shots of the film. So I brought on a magic consultant because I wanted just in case black magic is real, I wanted to keep everybody on set safe. We hear a lot of stories about, on horror sets, spooky things happening, people getting hurt. So we brought on a consultant who is a practicing witch, and she kept us all safe. And a lot of the reasoning behind the objects that we used and the placements of the objects was that this character would be honoring Hecate. That was the idea, the subtext, something you wouldn't know as an audience member, but what our actress was working with. And Hecate and Medea go hand in hand, according to myth. So Medea kind of just kept showing up as our process progressed, and I wanted to honor her at the beginning of the film. I wanted to honor that myth, and I also wanted to set up the audience's expectations for something heightened. And I hope we accomplished that.
What's the name of the movie? Sorry.
What's that?
What's the name of your movie?
It's called Beach Day, and you can watch it on AstoriaFilmFestival.org right now.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and it is a phenomenal performance, and sort of I'll have more questions about that later, but
we got into
I feel like the need
witches,
for
sorry to interrupt, but years ago, before the internet, we would send out monthly folders with our new movies or what we were releasing, and we did one. These are kind of foldouts, and we did one as if it was a Wiccan publication, and boy, did we get into trouble with the Wiccans. Oh my God. So they're serious. They're very, very serious. We had to do a lot of apologizing and explaining, and
yeah, I feel like on-set witchcraft coordinator or I think that is a job that needs to be standardized.
We had one.
Yeah. So I'd love to throw this next question, John, to you. Every film begins with an idea, but pretty quickly that idea needs to turn into some words committed to paper. You've written some horror features, some of which you've placed in festivals. You're a writer with representation. How the hell do you begin a feature horror script? What does it look like?
Like the $64,000 question, right? Like, where do your ideas come from? And my answer is it starts always in a different place. But for me, a lot of where germs of story start is from observing, from listening to people, watching people. I mean, I love people watching. Astoria is a great place to people watch. I mean, when was the last time you stopped in the middle of Steinway Street and just watched for 15 minutes on a Saturday afternoon? Like, the stories that you'll catch a piece of or that you'll start to pick up on is pretty amazing. So sometimes it's hearing something or seeing something that kind of catches my eye, and maybe a story starts to form around an image or something like that. But I also look at movies that I like, and I start to wonder kind of like, what a John Robertson version of a werewolf movie looks like, and how I would kind of find myself, how I would find my way into maybe some of those tropes. And sometimes it's, what would I do with an inciting incident like The Old Dark House? Two people who are stuck in a, broken down car in a storm who have to stop at a creepy place. It's kind of, in a way, like what the opening hook for a movie like Barbarian is, right? It's two people stuck in a place together, and yet that trope is now almost 100 years old. But for horror in particular, I think a lot of the ideas that I have kind of start from within, with things I'm afraid of, and not just what's lurking at the foot of my bed that I can't see, or the noise at the end of the dark hallway, but things that I'm actually really afraid of, like dying, or losing someone, losing a piece of myself. And what I like to do with horror stories is kind of exorcise those fears by putting a face or a concept to them, and then creating characters to face that, and then whether they win or lose is kind of determined by the story. And I also like to talk about, I call it thinking with both doors open, which I don't think I came up with, but I heard someone say meditation is like thinking with your front and your back door open, and letting ideas come right through the front and go right out the back door, acknowledging them, but never serving them tea. Just let ideas in, and if you wrote down 100 screenplay ideas, you might find one or two that are worth pursuing. But it's important to be able to write down, I think, that 100, to just let your brain kind of wander and find its way. And I've been very fortunate that going to film school and learning things about structure and character and things like that, it's like, okay, well, then when I find a concept or an idea that I really like, I'm able to kind of apply it into that structure and kind of find a story, from that acorn to a tree.
Thank you, John. John, at some point you shared with me these like scene study books that I thought were really cool. The ones, it was a filmmaker or writer who had kind of gone through and just beat out every film that they watched in different genres.
Yeah. So that was
say this in case, like, yeah, maybe like
this was really fantastic. If you go online and you look for beat sheets or outlines of films, of course you're going to find them, but there's a really fantastic writer named Kelly Goodner who wrote these books called Sceneclopedias. She did one for horror, and she did one for action adventure as well. And what she actually did, just as an exercise, and I started doing this myself, is she started actually writing down list by list the scenes that happen in a movie. And there's nobody else that I've found who actually does this, who breaks every kind of every act down. And she does this for 25 movies in these books. And I kind of liken that to, taking a car apart to see how all of the pieces work together, and how they all go back together. Because it's one thing, I think, to understand emotionally how a story needs to work, and you do have to write with your heart and your soul a little bit, but I think it's also very important to make things make sense. And when things structurally don't work, you can feel it. And I'm not saying that you should, write to a strict structure or anything like that. But I think the way that I've learned the most about especially screenwriting is by reading other scripts. The thing I always tell people to do is pick your favorite movie, and especially if it's a horror movie, and see if you can find the script online, read the script, then watch the movie, then watch the movie with the script in your lap. And it's pretty amazing to see how something goes from the page, up to the screen, and how it all comes together. Because writing is very solitary, but filmmaking is very collaborative. So it's amazing to write a script that really is. I don't think a screenplay is a work of art. I think it's a blueprint for a work of art. So I enjoy being an architect, as it were.
Thank you, John. Super helpful. Marta, can I throw you a question as you're walking through the streets of Lima? I might need to wait on that one.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I throw you a question? I'm not making this easy for you.
No. It's totally fine. Go ahead.
I wanted to talk about setting, and it very aptly, as you're walking kind of in a beautiful city at night. As the title Welcome to New York suggests, the setting of New York City is central to your film. How did the city inspire you?
How not? I think everyone that arrives in New York City, I don't care if you're an artist or not, but you have to be inspired by the city. Of course, I spent great years there, and I love the city so much. And this is like a love letter, no, to the city, because I thought that if you have the chance to film something in New York, you better show New York a little bit. So that's what I tried. And I remember the first time I arrived in New York, coming from the airport, you see the skyline from far away, from Queens, and you see a huge cemetery. I don't know if you picture oh, for sure, right? So, and this is also one of my opening shots because it had a great impact visually. It's part of the inspiration. Also, the vibrant colors, the wide avenues, the fire escapes. I want it all. And also I wanted to have something like a character that doesn't catch a break, you know? So it's one thing after the other. And it's totally the opposite of my experience with the city, because I just found there very nice people. But this woman finds an empty, mean city, which it was a challenge to make New York look like that. If you take a look at the short film also, being shot in 16 millimeters, like trying to mimic the 70s look, the challenge was to have a feel of emptiness. And everybody is so mean to her, and she doesn't know what to do. And whatever she tries to do, it doesn't work anyways. And it's going straight to a fatal destiny, no?
Yeah, it's amazing. And then at the end of the film, you kind of meet this, or you've met them, but you see a street vendor in situ, and they're serving a certain
Yes.
basically the lifeblood, the essence of the people of the city. And I really appreciated just sort of the poetry of that. And we're all kind of like letting blood for this incredible city as we try to make art and live here.
Yeah, that was shot in Tompkins Park on a Sunday morning, where a lot of people gathered, and there is a lot of people also from charities and helping people out. So I wanted that contrast also.
Yeah, thank you, Marta.
You're welcome.
David, your setting is also the title of your film, Chateau Sauvignon. It's an incredible setting. I want to know about how you scouted it, how you found it, how that location influenced what your film became. And then there's a second part to this question, which is like, I'm sure it didn't look like what it did when you found it as it does on film. Can you talk about the production design?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. Location scouting for Chateau Sauvignon was probably one of the most intense parts of production. It's a proof of concept short film, and as a quick, not even a log line, it's cannibals on a winery, essentially is what it is. So we wanted to give it a nice, dark, gritty kind of feel already. And I'm part French, and I'm from wine country in France, and I really want to make this movie in France. But I was here in the city doing a master's program, and it was my thesis. And so I decided that I had this feature concept, and I wanted to explore the killers a little more. And New York is perfect with the wineries that are not too far away in the Hudson Valley and in Long Island and in New Jersey. So one of my producers is from Long Island, and we reached out to every single winery that's in Long Island, hundreds of them. And for a couple of months, every weekend, we would go out and visit each one that contacted us saying, yeah, we are open to having a production here. And what we discovered is Long Island, their wineries are very modern. They're very industrial. They're not really very old. So we had to expand the search. And we started reaching out to ones in New Jersey, northern New Jersey, as well as the Hudson Valley. And we started reaching out to ones even further up north, close to the Finger Lakes. And eventually it was immediately when driving up to this place, I knew this was going to be it. I mean, the look, it's a creepy winery. It's as old as they say in the movie. There's a little, the main protagonist gives a speech to the two guests saying, oh, this winery has been around since the French Huguenots have been here. And all of that is true to that actual winery. So that was a little piece that I gave back to Benmarl Winery, which is the location that we shot at. We also shot at Clinton Vineyards. There's a little part in the tasting room. That's another winery. And initially we had a really big plan for an outdoor sequence that we were going to shoot at Clinton Vineyards. We're going to have a fake moon with a balloon that we were going to blast lights at. We had crazy smoke machines, but we had run a couple of long days and the weather had turned and there was no way we were going to finish that day on time. So we stayed at the main venue, and I put my full faith into my DP. And rather than have huge, massive shots, they were a lot closer. They're a lot more claustrophobic. And it doesn't necessarily look like it in the edit, but he's just running up and down the same row of vines the whole time, which of course, I see it every time I see the movie, but nobody else does. And movie magic, I suppose. But the production design team was incredible. James Bartle, he's a New York based. I think he now teaches in New Jersey. He was fantastic. I knew him from my undergrad years. And they had, whenever we were shooting in one location, they were working very hard on another. There's a bedroom that the mother is in. They completely redid the wallpapers in that room. There's a barrel room where we just hung certain things up. But what was nice about this location was a lot of it was already kind of pre-arted to a certain degree. So it was more filling the space or taking certain items out rather than having to start from scratch. And what was nice about the location is that there's a couple of small rooms that all we need to do was put a light bulb in them and we could shoot a scene. And so it allowed the production design team to stay focused on another bigger setup. Yeah, I think that answers the question, right?
Yeah, it looked gorgeous. And one of my favorite line from the whole movie is, I can give you a quick tour of the barrel cave.
Oh, don't do it.
If anyone ever says that to you, don't do it. Just don't. Don't go down to the barrel cave.
I usually shout that out during the screenings as well, and people kind of turn to me and shush me during my own film.
Don't go.
Do it.
Andy, I'd love to throw a question your way just in talking about setting. Your film is set in no small way in the mind of the viewer after the film is over. And that's like kind of a logic puzzle until you've seen the film, which is a bit of a really fun, hooky logic puzzle. Can you talk a bit about how you arrived at that hook?
Definitely. I think, I guess part of that is just necessity, in the sense that like I make my stuff, the first thing I did was the Pine Creepers, and that sort of defined like the format of what it was, where it's just me just making stuff. And so I had to figure out what could conceivably be done with a guy, alone in his bedroom. And so part of that necessitated like a narration, like a first person narration format to the material. And so then I told that story, and it was a very straightforward story, and I loved it. I thought it was cool. But then I started thinking like, I feel like to incorporate sort of the format itself into the storytelling would be a really interesting idea. So I sort of tell this more involved story in my second film in the series, where it sort of involves the audience in the narrative by the time you get to the end of the story. So I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it, because it's just fun to actually watch it. So if you want to go check it out, you can watch it for free on YouTube. It's just Don't Walk Home Alone After Dark. And I got a couple stories up there. They're just short stories that I wrote that I just turned into these films. I feel like being born out of that necessity of having to be able to do it for nothing, kind of created some of the mother of invention, I guess they would say, to come up with some interesting format ideas. I got some other stuff too that I'm sort of like, I think the format really could be sort of used in interesting ways, like to use narration in interesting hooky ways is an interesting thing to explore. So this is just one of the cool things that I was trying to do.
I love it. Yeah, it's sort of it's like an iceberg, in that you spend 10% of the time watching the film and 90% of the time kind of thinking about it afterward, which is always a really hard thing to execute. But you did it wonderfully.
Thanks.
I mean, Andy, you use the medium of animation. I'll circle back to that. Mike, I'd love to talk about just your choice to use documentary form. Your film interrogates this idea of ethical cannibalism. As you mentioned, it's a satire. Why go doc?
So it's a genre that I've always enjoyed. I love as a filmmaker kind of presenting worlds that are very real, very grounded, feel kind of, like you're amongst these characters, and then just kind of shifting things off kilter ever so slightly. And so for us, for this idea, the story follows a woman called Stacy. She's one of the 1.6% of millennials who have turned to ethical cannibalism as a sustainable food source. It just seemed that the genre of mockumentary, presenting that fact in that kind of genre, everyone just stops and go, but that's not real, right? You made that up. Which, I think we could have achieved in a slightly different genre. But for me, yeah, this kind of just very real, hey, what if this thing is happening? We accept that as fact. And then when we take the leap to, the Michelin star chef Ghost, who teaches her how to cook him, I think we kind of take that leap a little easier, because everything up to that point has been just kind of presented as fact, at least for me anyway. And again, like I was saying earlier, it kind of, the horror element of it did kind of creep up on us. It was a very quick production period. It was kind of just pre-vaccine. We were still kind of COVID wave number, whichever one it was. So we wrote it Friday night, we shot Saturday, we cut the thing on Sunday. And so just kind of on a practical level, having two actors that were fantastic improvisers. We had the script kind of outlined, but they could just riff. They were so good just kind of thinking on their feet. So letting them do that, rolling two cameras to kind of capture all that, practically, it just meant that I could get enough coverage to cut the thing together to kind of have something at the end of it. And so, yeah, we just kind of threw all these ideas, the fingers in the blender, we had the sous vide foot, we had all this stuff. And it was only when we cut the thing together into a kind of 12-minute film did all of this just become a little overwhelming and kind of gross. And I think that's when we lent into the horror elements of it. And it's why we developed that into a feature as well. We're kind of, shopping that script around, looking for kind of the right team that really kind of understands that genre, the world, the tone of it, to kind of get that off the ground and, yeah, keep exploring that world. And it's a very real thing. We are living, we're overpopulated as a planet. I mean, it kind of makes sense if you think a little bit.
So are you starting like an Astoria Cannibals Club to go along with this?
I mean, look, we've got, there's a vineyard, we have a wine pairings. I mean, it writes itself, really.
There's no less than 3 films on this panel that involve the consumption of human flesh and/or liquids. So
it's very hot right now. I think that's
wouldn't be a horror panel if not. Lloyd, can I throw you a question just about Toxic Avenger? Congratulations on the new version of Toxic Avenger, the reboot premiering at Fantastic Fest. This is an iconic, heroic character. Kids and parents everywhere just love the Avenger. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like to see a new version of that character exist in your kind of headcanon?
Well, first of all, as a factoid or a factloid, speaking of animation, the Toxic Avenger, the original one, is the only movie in history in which a young boy's head gets squashed by the wheel of an automobile that was made into a politically correct environmental cartoon show called The Toxic Crusaders. And there's all sorts of video games and things that are still being made off Toxic Crusaders. So it's amazing. And there's also a musical that's good for the little old ladies who like to go to the matinees, as well as the trauma fans with tattoos and things in their noses and those kinds of things. So it's amazing where the Toxic Avenger has been, and now with the reimagining, Legendary, which makes movies like Pacific Rim and Kong versus Godzilla versus Kong, $400 million movies. They've made a big budget Toxic Avenger, but they picked the right guy. They picked Macon Blair, who's a wonderful writer director. He's only directed one movie, but he's a trauma fanatic, and he really brought the trauma spirit, as well as lots of callbacks for our fans. But Peter Dinklage plays the Toxic Avenger, and others. Kevin Bacon. There's a whole bunch of stars in it who are very enthusiastic, and they scheduled they had 5 screens at this festival in Texas, and then they were sold out immediately, and then they scheduled a couple more screenings. I had to leave, but they were sold out instantaneously. So I think in my opinion, the reimagining is better than the original. I mean, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And I think they want to show we have a 4K box of Toxic Avenger with all the 4 Toxic Avenger movies and hours of extras that have come out. It was released today, and I've seen it. I was just in St. Louis and Springfield and Alamo, and I just saw the Toxic Avenger with people that could be my grandchildren or grand monsters, and many of them had not seen the Toxic Avenger, and they loved it. And in 4K on a big screen, it really is amazing. There is a difference. I didn't believe it, but it was shown in New York, but I couldn't go, and it's been a few places. I just haven't been able to go, but the 4K thing was pretty nice. So I think we've been very fortunate to there have been other attempts to make the Toxic Avenger a mainstream movie over the years, but we got lucky with Legendary because they picked the guy who really knew trauma. He loves cinema. He lives in Austin, so he hasn't been perverted by the cesspool of the West Coast or the media conglomerates. Macon Blair, he's one of the darlings of Sundance. He's gotten several movies that he's written, like Green Mile and Murder Party, and his one movie, I Don't Feel Safe in This World Today. Try to see it. I think it's still on HBO, but it's great. It's terrific. He's much younger than I, obviously, but he's really talented, and I can't wait to see the movie coming out after. They're kind of dribbling it out at Legendary as to try to get word of mouth through different festivals like Sitges in Spain, which is a good one for you folks. By the way, one other thing, and I'll shut up. My wife of 50 years, she was the New York State Film Commissioner for 20 years and created the incentive whereby if you make a movie in New York State, you get about 1/3 of your money back in cash. And now she's the film commissioner. She produced my latest #Shakespeare shitstorm. She retired, but the unions and the mayor called her back. She's now the New York City Film Commissioner, and she's as nice to you folks as she is to Woody Allen or well, sorry, I shouldn't mention him, but as she is to any of the Oliver Stone. Well, I shouldn't mention him. She's as nice to the young people who's just starting out as she is to the big stars and the big time producers. So Pat Sweeney Kaufman's her name, and the New York City, it's called MOSE. She's in charge of media, of all the media, the films, theater, dance, gaming, etc. So that office is under her leadership very responsive to try to continue to build an industry in New York City. So think about that for your next.
Yeah, that's amazing. Such vital work that she's
15
doing.
new studios in New York State, and there's one that's just finished on Pier 94 along the Hudson River. And her incentive is one of the reasons all these new studios and all the work that has come into New York as a result of this incentive. We didn't use it while she was a film commissioner because of optics, even though I had every right to do it, but it's a nasty world. But on #Shakespeare shitstorm, which is the Tempest, we did use it, and eventually we'll get a piece. We'll get a piece of it's below the line money. But now I think New York State gives a percentage above the line, so it's very competitive with the New Jersey and the other states that have Texas, not Texas. I can't remember, Louisiana and Canada, that have these generous incentives. So it's a good way to help get your movie financed.
You heard it here first. Take advantage of those state incentives. Robin, I'd love to throw the next question to you. And I know we're sort of getting towards the end of our time. I want to make sure we have time to open it up to Q&A. But Robin, you're an actor, a choreographer. Your film is mostly wordless, carried by this incredible parallel choreography as you intercut between these two different dark rituals, a date and a summoning, witchcraft, cursing. Can you talk about the intersection between choreography and filmmaking?
That's such an interesting question, and I love that you called a date a dark ritual. So I think for me, as you know, someone who has a background as a choreographer, I think it is very apparent how directing filmmaking is a dance. You are dancing with the actors. You're creating, well, first of all, let me back up. Both are incredibly visual mediums, right? So while I don't want to discount dialogue or music, hopefully if you were to turn off the sound, put a film on mute, you could get the story from the shots, from the way the camera moves, from we're an extreme close-up and someone is crying and it's an establishing shot. You kind of understand the beats in the narrative arc. And that's the same with choreography, right? If you were to, hopefully a good choreography can be danced to several different songs and be just as effective, take on different meaning, but be just as effective. So that's the first thing. Secondly, when you're choreographing, you have to be aware of so many different moving pieces, particularly if it is a large number. And I have a theater background. So for me, my choreography work was with many dancers, many actors. So you have to be aware of, okay, this dancer is doing this track, this dancer is doing this track. How visually, if I step back, do all of these different tracks and dancers and moving parts work together to create one story? And that's kind of what filmmaking is, right? In a different way. You know, my sound guy, my DP, my actors, how is everybody working together on set to tell this story, to make this film together? And, you know, playing with different shots is kind of like playing with different dance moves, in my opinion. You get to play with texture and dynamic. Small movements are tight shots, and big establishing shots are sort of like grand, you know, port de bras moves. Yeah, for me, everything comes back to dance. That's my answer.
Great answer. And your film, I was reminded, and hopefully this is complimentary, the third act in the movie Annihilation. There's this, basically the whole third act is this incredible sort of dual choreography between these two actors kind of existing across this sort of first contact. But yeah, I was just like, man, this is such cool choreography. So great work. One last question before I open up for Q&A. I know we're 2 minutes over our runtime. Would the panelists be up for, I don't know, another 10-15 minutes? Is that okay? Just do we have, all right, you guys are amazing. And nobody needs to run to watch the Phillies game. Andy, so as an animator, and director, animator, what about working in the medium of animation is challenging, and what opportunities does it present?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of challenges, I think, to working in animation, just because it takes so long to do, and it's so laborious just for like such a small amount of footage. It takes so much work, and so that also, I guess, kind of translates to expensive if you don't know how to do it yourself. You know, it's an expensive medium, and and I guess expensive in the sense of like sweat equity, because if you're going to do it all yourself, it really takes a lot of time. It's not so easy to do. I think it's also kind of hard, especially when we're talking about horror, right? So doing animation when the tone is really delicate, if you're trying to make sure that the audience can really take this world seriously and sort of forget about the fact that it's a series of drawings that are moving on the screen, that you do need to, there's an easy way that you could accidentally tip into like goofy or too crude or that kind of thing. And so to have your audience take it seriously, you do have to be very careful about what you're doing. And that means a lot of control over what you're doing. And that, like when you're doing live action shooting, there's a lot of like awesome stuff you can find in the moment on the day when you're shooting, whether it's like a great location, like David was talking about, finding this location and having that sort of provide some really found value to your story, or like if it's a scene with improv with actors, that are like really feeding off each other, there's stuff you can find on the day, but in animation, it's very much all engineered. Like it's too expensive to be screwing around too much. You've got to be like really have a solid sort of like vision in your head of exactly what it is you want to make, and then create that in order to tell any kind of clear story in animation. So it is quite challenging to sort of like have it work in this sort of a genre, but also that kind of cuts both ways, because it also is like, it's an amazing opportunity. If you can imagine something, you can then create it if you have sort of like the skills to be able to manifest that stuff. And so you're not limited by what you can find on the day or what you can do, that you can actually sort of like in this last story that I told, The Worm, I had this dream about this thing, about this creature. And so I wake up and I can just like jot down like ideas, and I can start sketching, and I can start doing stuff, and I can turn that thing into a real thing. I can make it real. And I didn't have to then have an unlimited amount of money and or technology that could like do it. I just have to draw it. I have to figure out how to like communicate the idea through my craft. And so I think it's magical in that sense. It's just also like hard to access if you don't have 20 years to practice.
Great answer. And I want more, and it's hard to do, but I just want more animated horror. I don't know who I need to tell to spend the money on their slate to just get.
I think so too. That's it. Like that's why I made this stuff too, was because also it's hard to like pitch this kind of stuff around to anybody who's like buying stuff, because it's a little bit not the norm, especially in Western animation. It's like it's very relegated to like kids stuff, like kid material. And so I knew no one was going to pay me to like make this stuff, so I just had to do it and make the stories that I want to tell and prove that there is an audience that can really enjoy this. And I love it. It's just the stuff that I want to see. So hopefully everybody else kind of likes it too.
Yeah, it seems that they do. Well, I think that ends the kind of portion of this that I am moderating. I would love to open it up to anybody who is on the call, any filmmakers or anybody who has questions for our illustrious panelists before we say goodnight. David.
I have a question for all of my fellow panelists. I'd love to know what you're doing next and where I can reach you or follow you. Mike, yeah, take it away.
Yeah, as one cannibal filmmaker to another. So yeah, two main kind of big things going on at the moment. I'm in post-production on my first feature film, which is called And Through the Portal We Go, about the last 3 members of a cult who get stuck in a time loop whilst trying to transcend to the higher plane of existence through a shimmering portal. Also a dark comedy dealing with cults and things like that. And then the feature version of Cook with the Heart. Yeah, kind of tightening up that script now before we hopefully can find a little more financing and stuff with that one. So cults and cannibals are kind of my life at the minute, which I don't know if that's good or not. I don't know. But you can find me at Evening Squire is our handle on Instagram, Facebook, the website, stuff like that. Yeah, a small production company based out of Astoria. Yeah, that's me.
John.
So I just threw my social handle in the chat for folks. Feel free to reach out on like I said, Twitter until it burns to the ground, which could be very imminent, and Instagram. Yeah, I'm now that the writer's strike is over, I am back to work. I sold a pitch back at the end of last year for an action comedy, actually, that I would describe as Lethal Weapon meets Collateral. And one of the stipulations of the pitch and the screenplay was that it couldn't globetrot too much. So I wrote a script about a young handler and assassin driving around, and the furthest they go is from Rego Park to Hudson Yards and back again. And they spend most of the movie actually in Astoria and Sunnyside, the neighborhoods that I grew up going around to in Queens. So that was a lot of fun. And then just worked on a pitch, sold it to Treatment for kind of a big sci-fi epic. So I'm enjoying being back to work, and it's so much fun. But also around this time of year, I always just kind of want to dig in my heels and work on something kind of spooky. Yeah, who knows? Maybe if I get a week to lay low, I might dig into the old Wayback File and find something scarier to write. But yeah, that's it for me now.
Hi, David. I just want to say I had the pleasure of seeing your film last year at Bridgeport Film Festival, and I remember it because it was so horrifying, and also because I believe your lead actor is Michael Lors. Is that correct?
That is correct.
We went to college together, and we lived on the same floor freshman year. So we spent a lot of time partying together, and I was thrilled to see his face on the screen.
That was his screen debut, as a matter of fact.
Oh, I mean, he's amazing. You should all follow Michael Lors, and if you're following David, you can probably find Michael from there. Yeah. So what's next for me, first of all, is to watch all these other films because I'm so excited from this conversation. But what I'm working on next is another short film screenplay, and I'm going in the complete opposite direction. As you've heard so far, Beach Day is pretty dialogue-less. It is experimental. So I know I can do that. People seem to like it. I'm getting into festivals, so people like it, but I have no idea if I can write dialogue, and I want to try. So I'm working on a dialogue-heavy screenplay about my grandmother and mental illness. And that's all I'll say about that.
I'm producing some movies after hashtag Shakespeare Shitstorm. It was a long, we filmed in Albania, first American company to film in Albania. And speaking of Korn, we had the famous Albanian trained whales who defecate, and Korn is in their duty. And it's based on National Geographic true things. But after hashtag Shakespeare Shitstorm, which was a big, it was very difficult. I made a big tribute to Hitchcock. I actually had vertigo for 3 or 4 days. I'm producing several movies for new young talent. If you check trauma.com or my fan site, lloydkaufman.com. My email is lloydk, LLOYDK. I read everything that comes in. And we've identified people like James Gunn, Eli Roth, Samuel L. Jackson. Lots of first movies of many talented people in front of the camera, behind the camera, are in the Trauma library, most of which can be seen on Trauma Now, the streaming service. But I've got a movie we're starting shooting on November 1st, Caterkiller, which is by Grant Herson. It's in kind of the subject, the subtext is that we have insects dying off. The poor monarch butterflies are almost extinct, and a lot of the both good and bad insects are dying off. So that's kind of a sub theme. We're just finishing up Curse of the Weird Ear, an anti-hunting movie, which is trauma. I mean, it's a trauma movie. It's funny. It's got horror. It's got all the Cuisinart of genres, but it's a good one, directed by Ben Johnson. Heidi Moore just had her premiere, world premiere at Fantastic Fest, where the movie I produced, Kill Dolly Kill, wonderful film. It's a horror comedy musical drag movie, drag film, and it's terrific. And we're getting that into festivals and a few theaters, hopefully. Yeah, we got some theaters. Mercedes the Muse has a new movie she's shooting called Mansploitation, which is filming now in California. So interested in new young filmmakers who love film and are trying to do something quite one of a kind. As for myself, I'm working on a script based on Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, but I'll need about $500,000. My movies don't make any money, so I have to rely on the kindness of strangers. So that script is coming along. It's going to be very good. Written by Martin Murray, who's has a master's at Columbia and was in that screenwriting program up there. And we've got a few other movies by young directors that are being filmed in the next or at least starting to be filmed in the next 6 months. So if any of you have something, lloydk@trauma.com. I'm very easy. I answer my emails, unlike many people in the business, as I know from experience. And again, thank you all. A lot of wonderful panel, and thank you, Bryan, for making all this possible. And again, Trauma's based. Our building is a small building. We do have a green screen if you need it, and come by and say hello.
Thank you, Lloyd. And busy times, but I congratulate all the incredible work championing first-time filmmakers. I mean, that's just, as you know, and as you pointed out, extraordinarily vital. And we all, as viewers, reap the benefits when these movies come out.
It's too stupid. Cannibal the Musical wasn't finished. Trey Parker and Matt Stone came to us first stop on the train, but they wanted too much money. And so we said, go to the big guys. It was my wife and I fell out of bed watching the cut. It wasn't finished. And then they couldn't get anybody interested because it's a musical about cannibalism and Oklahoma meets the Toxic Avenger kind of thing. But anyone could see it's hilarious, and the mainstream missed it. And now, of course, it's one of our most successful movies, and I'm in at least one of their later films. And I have a part in Orgasmo, and I think something else. But the mainstream is stupid. They're so scared of losing their houses that they don't own, or their big cars that they don't really own, so they are afraid to take any kind of risk. And that's why Legendary really they were aberrant as far as my 50 years of being an independent filmmaker and being in the underground. They really did a great job.
Who else needs to answer what they're up to? What are you up to?
Well, I'll answer. I am up to, obviously, my TV show comes out December 7th, as you know, Bryan, on Netflix. It's a family animated series, Hilda on Netflix. So you guys could check that out, I guess, if you're interested in adventure and thrills and just all kinds of cozy fun. But then in sort of the horror realm, obviously, I'm just going to continue on with my Don't Walk Home Alone After Dark. And I've started working on another little story that I'm going to put together, put that out and see what happens. See if I can, you know, build the project into something that's really sustainable and fun, and maybe, you know, prove that there is an audience for different kinds of subject matter in the medium of animation. We'll see.
We'll be following.
Marta, you're the last one. I'm still one of them. I'll answer my own question. Hi. Chateau Sauvignon, during COVID, I had the opportunity of turning the short into a feature script, a screenplay. And it's done the round of competitions, which I'm really proud about. Recently, we were at Nashville Film Festival, as well as Flickers, Rhode Island Film Festival, with the screenplay. And I was able to use it to get into a master's in screenwriting program at Royal Holloway, University of London, graduating there in December, which is very exciting. So I have another horror screenplay, feature screenplay, ready to roll. Otherwise, I'm in post on 2 short films that are a little stuck because of money issues. What else, of course. So we're applying to grants, looking for benefactors for those 2. One of them is a cosmological sci-fi story. It's based on a Frederick Brown short story. And it's mad scientist showcasing his time-traveling device, and it all goes horribly wrong. And the second one is an adaptation of a Guy de Maupassant short story. It's a little more dramatic. It's called Morning Vigil, and it's essentially a portrait of morning as told in Victorian times. So I'm really excited to continue pushing those through and getting the festival circuit soon. Been really fortunate with Chateau Sauvignon Terroir. We've been on the circuit for a number of years now. We're almost at 600 official selections. Gonna get there real soon, and then looking for a platform to release it on. So Lloyd, if you're looking for some short films, I'd love to send you this one.
Sure, send it. Love to see it.
Excellent. Submitted to Trauma Dance a while back. Wasn't exactly your flavor, but I'll send it again just in case. You never know.
I don't select. We have young people.
Perfect. Great. Right to your inbox then. And yeah, so that's good things to look forward to in the future. I want to thank Nina at the festival. Thank you for having this panel. Bryan, Children of the Corn, lovely having you moderate us, and thank you to all of our other fellow panelists. Listen to your stories. And Robin, really fast, love to let you know Relic, a horror movie out of Australia. It's about mental health and women within the same family and how it affects them. Relic, check it out.
Marta, did you want to go? I don't want to force you, but I don't want to leave you out either.
Oh, I'm here. Yes. As you know, I'm in Lima, in Peru, for a few months. I'm researching some horror stories related to Peruvian culture. And also, I keep studying philosophy of horror. You can find me on Instagram at Chico and Punky Productions, which is my little indie company. I freelance. I'm based in South Spain. If you ever need a producer, a collaboration, I move all over, and I love to meet new people. Thank you for the opportunity. I will be reaching out to my fellow panelists. Thank you, Bryan. Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Nina.
Thank you all. Thank you so much, everybody, for being a part of this. It was a treat, and I'll be posting the the video on social as soon as I have a minute to edit it, which may be over the weekend. So not till then, but thank you, everybody, really. And Lloyd, I'm on 14th Street and 34th Avenue. So and we run a whole production lab with young people, from the neighborhood who are interested in filmmaking. So I'm gonna reach out and see if we can bring them to you and you can meet them. That would be lovely.
Get classes in there.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, so much. Happy Halloween. Enjoy yourselves.
Halloween.
You.
Thank you all for
Happy
your
Halloween,
time.
Bryan,
guys.
thank you for putting this all together, and your questions were so thoughtful. Like you watched everything, which is really rare, and I want to just acknowledge that because that's awesome. Thank you.
It's easy when the stuff is so cool. So thank you everybody for sharing your work and for joining the panel.
Thank you very much.
Good.
I
Take
love
care, everybody.
Horror is my favorite genre because of the horror filmmakers I've met over the years through the festival. So thank you all for being quite lovely.
Yeah, the spookier the stuff, it seems the nicer
The nicer the people. It's
tracks.
really like I used to be a scaredy cat. Now I watch it because I know the people making it are the best in the world. So thank you for being you. Take care, everybody. I'll
Thanks,
follow up
everybody.
with
you.
video so you can have it too.
Awesome.
Okay, ciao.
Bye.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye bye.